The night the road refused to look away. She lay where the frozen asphalt surrendered to drifting snow, her body a dark interruption in a world scrubbed clean by white. One of her legs was locked inside a steel trap, the metal teeth buried deep, unforgiving. She no longer fought it. The struggle had ended hours ago. What strength remained was spent shielding the tiny, fragile weight pressed against her underside. A newborn puppy, barely clinging to life, shuddering with cold beneath the rise and fall of her chest. To anyone who might have passed, she would have been invisible. Just another casualty of winter, another discarded tool of a hunt gone wrong, meant to vanish beneath snowfall and silence. No one expected her to survive the night, and no one would have imagined that a wounded animal, trapped and bleeding, would still place its last instinctive trust in protecting something smaller than itself. The storm did not care. Snow slashed sideways across the outskirts of Anchorage, Alaska, erasing edges, swallowing sound. Sky and ground blended into one endless blur, indifferent and absolute. Ethan Walker drove through it anyway. His pickup crawled along the narrow road, tires crunching over ice hardened like bone. Both hands rested steady on the wheel, his posture rigid without strain. At 42, Ethan moved with the quiet discipline of someone whose body still remembered commands long after the orders had stopped coming. He was tall, broad across the shoulders, built not for show but for endurance. Years of military conditioning had shaped him into something efficient, spare. His hair, once kept brutally short by regulation, had grown uneven, thinning slightly at the temples. A trimmed beard shadowed his jaw, emphasizing cheekbones carved more by exhaustion than age. His eyes, steel blue, alert, rarely blinking, belonged to a man who had learned early that hesitation carried consequences. For nearly 20 years, Ethan had been a Navy SEAL. Afghanistan had etched itself into him in ways that never fully healed. One mission, one wrong turn, one moment too late, 3 men lost under his command. Nothing dramatic broke inside him that day. No explosión. Just a quiet fracture that never set right. Since his honorable discharge 2 years earlier, Ethan had learned to keep his world small. He avoided crowds, trusted routine, spoke only when necessary. Anchorage was far enough north to keep life at a distance. The solitude suited the guilt he wore like a second skin. Inside the cab, the heater hummed weakly. The windshield wipers scraped uselessly against ice. Visibility narrowed to the reach of his headlights. Then, just beyond a bend, something interrupted the blankness. Dark, low, wrong. Ethan's foot hit the brake before his mind fully registered what he'd seen. The truck slid, tires protesting, then shuddered to a stop. Wind rushed in to fill the silence, clawing at metal and glass. He exhaled once. Slow, controlled. Training took over. Ethan pulled on his heavy parka and stepped out into the storm. Snow swallowed his boots with each step, the cold biting hard enough to burn, but he barely noticed. His attention stayed fixed on the shape ahead as he approached cautiously, scanning for movement, for wires, for anything out of place. It was a dog. A German shepherd lay on its side, massive even in collapse. Its thick sable and black coat was crusted with ice, fur stiffened by blood frozen into the snow beneath it. One powerful front leg was clamped inside a steel hunting trap, the jaws sunk cruelly into bone and muscle. Dark stains spread outward like frozen petals. The dog's ears were pinned back. His teeth were bared but not in attack. In warning, amber eyes locked onto Ethan with sharp, intelligent focus. This was no stray. The animal was fully grown, perhaps 4 or 5 years old, built like a working dog, broad chest, powerful limbs, posture disciplined even in agony. A faded scar traced beneath one eye, the kind earned through training or service, not neglect. The dog did not whine. It did not beg. It endured. Then Ethan saw what she was protecting. Beneath her belly, barely visible against the snow, trembled a tiny German shepherd puppy. Newborn, I still sealed shut. Its thin, dark body was no larger than Ethan's glove. It pressed weakly against its mother's warmth, unaware of the trap, the storm, or the certainty of death creeping closer with every breath. Something tightened painfully in Ethan's chest. Memory surged without warning. Sand and gunfire. A teammate bleeding out in his hands. His own fingers shaking despite every drill he'd mastered. He remembered being too late. He remembered the silence afterward. The dog growled, low and deep, the sound vibrating through the frozen air. Ethan stopped immediately. He raised his hands slowly, palms open, a gesture older than language. "Easy," he murmured, his voice rough from disuse. He wasn't sure if he was speaking to the dog, to the past, or to himself. The wind howled louder, snow slicing into exposed skin. Ethan assessed the situation quickly. The trap was illegal industrial steel meant for large game. Whoever had set it hadn't planned to return soon. Without help, the dog would bleed out or freeze. The puppy wouldn't last an hour. He stood there, cold creeping through his boots, weighing risk against consequence. He could walk away. Logic offered him every excuse: nature's cruelty, the danger, the fact that he owed nothing. But the soldier in him, the man who had once sworn never to leave anyone behind, refused to move. Slowly, deliberately, Ethan unclipped the flashlight from his belt and placed it on the snow, casting a steady pool of light between them. The dog's gaze followed every motion. The puppy whimpered, a sound so faint it nearly vanished into the storm. Ethan swallowed hard. "All right," he said quietly. "We'll figure this out." Above them, the storm raged on, indifferent to promises. It did not know or care that on a forgotten stretch of road, 3 lives had just collided. And none of them would walk away unchanged. Holding the line against the cold, Ethan lowered himself to his knees with deliberate care, every movement slow and measured, the way he once approached unexploded ordnance in foreign deserts. The snow soaked through his pants almost immediately, the cold biting hard, but he ignored it. His focus remained on the German shepherd, on the rise and fall of her chest, on the way her amber eyes tracked him without blinking. The growl deepened, not louder, but heavier. It vibrated through the air like a warning carried on instinct alone. She did not lunge. She no longer had the strength. Her body shook violently now, not from aggression, but from shock and blood loss. The puppy whimpered again, weaker this time, a thin sound that cut through Ethan's defenses with surgical precision. He studied the trap with a trained eye. Thick industrial steel. No give. Designed to hold its victim in place until isolation finished the job. Whoever had set it knew exactly what they were doing. And that quiet cruelty tightened Ethan's jaw. He pulled off his gloves. The cold stabbed instantly into scarred fingers. Years ago, frostbite had stolen sensation from 2 of them during a winter extraction gone wrong. Pain had long since become background noise. Speaking softly, he slipped out of his heavy parka and tossed it forward, so it landed over the dog's head and shoulders. The shepherd thrashed once, teeth snapping blindly, but Ethan was already moving. He used his weight, pinning her with practiced efficiency, knees, forearms, body aligned the way muscle memory demanded. Warm blood soaked into the snow. Breath steamed between them. Muscles burned. "Stay," he muttered. Not a command, but a plea. The fight drained from her faster than he expected. Shock was winning. With one arm bracing her body, Ethan clawed through the snow to where the trap's chain vanished into the ground. It was anchored deep beside a tree root, a rusted bolt driven into frozen earth. He moved back to the truck, grabbed a tire iron and a wrench, and went to work. Metal screamed against metal. His shoulders protested, old injuries flaring, reminders of a blast years earlier that had thrown him through the air and left him with a limp he hid well. Finally, the bolt gave way. The chain slackened. The trap still crushed the dog's leg, but she was no longer bound to the earth. For now, that would have to be enough. Ethan didn't release her immediately. He waited until her struggling slowed, until resistance faded into shallow breathing and pain. Only then did he ease back, keeping the parka between them. Her head lifted weakly. Their eyes met again, still fierce, but dimming. Ethan exhaled, long and unsteady. He turned to the puppy. It was colder than he'd feared. Its tiny chest fluttered irregularly beneath his fingers. He scooped it up gently, startled by how light it was, like holding a memory instead of a living thing. Without thinking, he slipped the puppy inside his sweater, pressing it against bare skin. The shock of cold made him hiss, but the puppy instinctively pressed closer, seeking warmth. Ethan returned to the injured dog, braced himself, and dragged her toward the truck. She was heavy, at least 80 pounds of muscle and bone. By the time he hauled her into the bed, his vision swam and his breath came in ragged bursts. He covered her with a tarp, securing it just enough to prevent movement. Then he climbed into the cab, cradling the puppy beneath his jacket. The engine turned, coughed, died. Silence fell harder than gunfire. Ethan rested his forehead against the steering wheel. For a brief moment he considered laughing. Of course this would happen. Outside, the storm intensified, snow swallowing the road behind him. He checked the puppy. Still breathing. Barely. He looked through the rear window at the tarp-covered shape in the bed. Leaving her there would kill her. Bringing her inside the cab was dangerous. He weighed the risks the way he always had, methodically, without emotion. Then he opened the door. With effort and care, he dragged the German Shepherd into the passenger seat, folding stiff limbs into the cramped space. The cab filled with the smell of wet fur, blood, and wild earth. The dog stirred but did not attack. Ethan shut the door, sealing them together. "All right," he said quietly. "We're in this now." Outside, the wind howled without mercy. Inside, 3 damaged lives waited through the longest night, bound together by a choice that could no longer be undone. The cold crept in like a patient enemy. It slipped through door seals, curled around Ethan's boots, and climbed his spine inch by inch. Snow battered the truck in steady waves, the wind moaning with a hollow persistence that sounded almost human. Ethan sat rigid in the driver's seat, every sense alert, every muscle ready for violence that never came. The German Shepherd lay curled unnaturally across the passenger seat, her breathing shallow and uneven. Each rise of her chest was an act of defiance. Her amber eyes followed Ethan's movements, no longer burning with threat, but holding onto vigilance. She was still dangerous. He knew that, but exhaustion and injury had dulled her edge. She wasn't surrendering. She was enduring. Ethan respected that. He slowly loosened his seatbelt and reached behind the seat for a thermal blanket, the kind he'd carried long before civilian life. The silver material crinkled softly. The dog's ears twitched, but she did not growl. He draped the blanket carefully over her hindquarters, avoiding the trapped leg. A low sound escaped her. Not a snarl, not a whine, but something ancient and restrained. Ethan nodded once, as if acknowledging a fellow soldier. Beneath his sweater, the puppy stirred again. Ethan slipped a hand inside his clothing, cupping the fragile form. The puppy's heartbeat fluttered like a trapped moth. Hypothermia. He'd seen it before in men. Cold didn't discriminate. "Not tonight," he whispered. He reached into the back seat for an empty plastic bottle. Outside, the engine block still held residual warmth. He cracked the hood and carefully siphoned warm coolant into the bottle, fingers burning as he worked. Back inside, he wrapped it in a rag and placed it on the floor near the dog, a small island of heat. Then he focused on the puppy. He unzipped his sweater fully and peeled off his thermal undershirt, pressing the puppy directly against his bare chest. Skin to skin, he covered them both again, teeth chattering despite his control. He breathed slowly, steadily. Temperature.
Circulation.
Time. Minutes stretched into something shapeless. The storm screamed outside, but inside the cab, the world narrowed to breath and heartbeat. Ethan rubbed the puppy gently, whispering broken phrases, half prayers, half encouragements, words without structure or belief. His voice cracked once. Across from him, the German Shepherd watched. The sharp edge in her eyes softened, replaced by something unfamiliar. Recognition. She shifted, ignoring pain, inching her head closer. A quiet understanding settled in the cab. Not trust, not yet, but something close enough to survive on. Time blurred. Ethan's limbs numbed. Then, beneath his palm, he felt it. A twitch. Then another. The puppy released a thin, broken sound, barely audible. Ethan froze, afraid to hope. The tiny chest rose again, stronger this time. Real. He exhaled shakily, a sound caught between a laugh and a sob. Across the cab, the German shepherd lifted her head and let out a soft, broken whine. Ethan met her gaze. "I see it too," he whispered. Outside, the storm raged on, indifferent. Inside, warmth fought back. Fragile but real. What remains after the storm? Dawn arrived without color or comfort. It seeped through the truck's frosted windows as a thin gray suggestion rather than true light, offering no warmth, only the quiet assurance that the night had finally loosened its grip. Ethan woke stiff and disoriented, his neck aching, his hands numb. His breath clouded the air in shallow bursts. For a moment, he didn't remember where he was. Then something shifted against his chest. The puppy. It lay tucked inside his sweater, small but warm now, its breathing steadier, its tiny body rising and falling with fragile determination. Relief eased a tightness in Ethan's chest he hadn't realized was still there. Across from him, the German shepherd stirred. Her eyes opened fully for the first time since the night before. They were still sharp, but the fevered edge had dulled, replaced by pain and exhaustion held behind stubborn restraint. The trapped leg remained swollen and dark inside the steel jaws, but the bleeding had slowed. Ethan knew it wasn't over. Without proper care, infection or frost would finish what the trap had started. Outside, the storm had weakened. The wind no longer screamed, it muttered. Snowdrifts still blocked parts of the road, but visibility had returned. Ethan stepped out into the cold, boots crunching loudly. He scanned the treeline, then the road. Nothing moved. He climbed back into the cab and reached beneath the seat for the satellite phone. An old habit he'd never shaken. The battery flickered, then held. The call connected thin and distorted. Anchorage Veterinary Emergency. "This is Dr. Sarah Collins." Her voice was calm, practiced, steady. Ethan explained quickly, his words clipped and factual, the soldier still embedded in his speech. She didn't interrupt. When he finished, there was a brief pause. "You did the right thing," she said. "But you can't keep her there. That leg needs surgery. The puppy needs warmth and milk. I'm sending help." Less than an hour later, the low rumble of an engine broke the silence. A Park Service snowcat pushed into view, orange paint dulled by ice and use. The driver climbed down. A broad man in his late 30s with a frost-dusted red beard and the cautious ease of someone who'd spent his life outdoors. "Hell of a night," he said simply. Together, they transferred the dog into the snowcat's insulated compartment. She growled once, then settled, conserving what little energy she had left. The puppy was placed into a heated carrier without ceremony. Ethan rode beside the driver in silence, watching the road slide past. Something unfamiliar pressed against his ribs. Not fear, not regret. Responsibility. At the clinic, Sarah Collins moved with efficient calm. She was tall, spare, her iron-gray hair pulled back without vanity. Years of Alaskan winters and operating rooms had etched purpose into her features. She examined the dog, the puppy, then finally Ethan himself. "You look worse than they do," she said dryly. He almost smiled. As they prepared the shepherd for surgery, Sarah brushed fur aside near one ear. Beneath it, faint but unmistakable, was a tattooed serial mark. "This dog was trained," she said quietly. "And abandoned." Ethan nodded. He already understood what that meant. When the surgery doors closed, exhaustion finally pulled him under. He slept in the waiting room, hands clasped, head bowed. Outside, the sun climbed pale and cold, steady and indifferent. The worst of the night was over. When Sarah returned, her mask lowered and her shoulders relaxed slightly. "She's stable," she said. "We saved the leg. Recovery won't be easy, but she'll walk again." "And the puppy?" Ethan asked. "Still fighting," Sarah replied. "Just like its mother." Later, he was allowed inside. The German shepherd lay on a padded mat, leg wrapped thickly, chest rising evenly. Her eyes opened as Ethan approached, guarded but clear. He crouched at a distance, letting her read him in her own time. "You're tougher than you look," he murmured. "She'll need a quiet place," Sarah said from the doorway. "And someone patient." Ethan thought of his cabin near the treeline, the silence that pressed in too hard some nights, the routines that kept him alive but never truly living. "I've got space," he said. The puppy was placed gently into his hands, bundled and squirming, its eyes still sealed shut. It fit there naturally. "Bottle-fed every few hours," Sarah said. "You sure?" Ethan looked down. "Yeah," he said. "I am." Weeks passed quietly. The cabin changed. Where there had once been only wind and creaking wood, there were now soft movements, the scratch of claws on floorboards, the rhythm of shared breathing. Ethan named the dog Shadow for the way she followed at a careful distance, always present, always watching. The puppy he called Echo, a smaller Echo with oversized ears and clumsy paws. Shadow healed slowly. She was disciplined, trained, responsive to hand signals and routine. Loud noises made her flinch. Sudden movements dropped her low and ready. Ethan understood. Trust grew through repetition, not promises. Echo grew fast, chasing snowflakes, tumbling over his own feet, sleeping pressed against Shadow's side. Watching them, Ethan felt something loosen inside him. Not peace exactly, but space enough to breathe. On a clear morning months later, Ethan stood outside as the sun crept over the trees. Shadow sat beside him, solid and calm. Echo bounced at her feet, tail thumping. He felt it then. Not an ending, a direction. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with thunder or light. Sometimes they come wrapped in snow, disguised as responsibility and pain, asking only that we stay when it would be easier to walk away. Ethan hadn't saved them because he was fearless or perfect. He saved them because compassion spoke louder than fear. And in choosing them, he found what he thought he'd lost forever: purpose.